He was taken as a prisoner. He was sworn to protect his people. But when the life of his only son hangs in the balance, this Comanche warrior witnesses something no one expected, and it changes everything. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The Texas sun blazed mercilessly across the vast prairie, turning the dry grass into an ocean of gold that shimmered under the late summer heat of 1853. Emma Catherine Morgan pressed her back against the rough bark of a cottonwood tree, her heart hammering so violently she feared it might burst through her chest. Her once pristine calico dress, the blue one she had worn for the journey west with the wagon train, now hung in tatters, stained with dust and dried blood that wasn't her own. Her auburn hair, usually pinned neatly in a bun, cascaded wildly around her shoulders, tangled with bits of prairie grass and twigs. 3 days had passed since the Comanche raid. 3 days since she had watched in horror as warriors on painted horses descended upon their small wagon train like a fierce summer storm. The screams still echoed in her mind, the chaos of gunfire and war cries blending into a nightmare she couldn't escape, even when she closed her eyes. She had been taken, along with 2 other women, bound and thrown across a horse-like cargo. The other women were gone now, traded to different bands or taken to separate camps. Emma had been brought to this village nestled in a hidden valley where a clear stream wound between hide lodges decorated with symbols she couldn't understand. For 3 days, she had been kept in a lodge at the edge of the encampment, guarded but not harmed. The women brought her food, small portions of dried meat and something like bread made from ground seeds. They spoke to her in their language, their words flowing like water over stones, beautiful but incomprehensible. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with something that might have been pity. The children stared from a distance, their dark eyes wide with wonder at this pale woman, with hair the color of autumn leaves. But it was the warrior who terrified her most. He was called Running Wolf by the others, a name she had pieced together from the respectful way they addressed him, and the wolf pelt he sometimes wore across his shoulders. He was tall and powerfully built, his bronzed skin stretched over muscles that spoke of a life lived in constant motion and challenge. His face was striking, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw, his long black hair decorated with feathers and strips of leather. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her unable to look away even as fear coursed through her veins. He moved with the grace of a predator, confident and aware of everything around him. His dark eyes seemed to see through her, past her fear to something deeper she didn't understand. Running Wolf had lost his wife 2 winters ago to the white man's spotted sickness. The pain still lived in his chest, like a stone that would never dissolve. She had been gentle and kind, filling their lodge with laughter and warmth. When she died, she left him with their son, a boy of 7 summers named Little Hawk. The child was his entire world now, the reason he rose each morning and the purpose behind every hunt, every raid, every decision he made as a warrior and leader among his people. The decision to take the white woman had not been his alone. The raid had been swift and necessary, retaliation for settlers who had stolen horses and killed 2 young men from their band. Running Wolf had argued against taking captives, knowing it would bring more trouble. But the other warriors had insisted. White women could be traded for supplies, for weapons, for leverage with the army forts that kept pushing deeper into Comanche territory. Emma had been chosen because she was young and strong, likely to survive the journey and fetch a good price. But something unexpected had happened on the 2nd night of her captivity. Little Hawk, curious and fearless as all children are, had slipped away from the lodge where he slept with his grandmother, Gray Morning. The boy loved to explore, to wander along the stream catching frogs or climbing the twisted trees that grew along the water's edge. Running Wolf had been in council with the other warriors, discussing whether to move the camp or stay through the coming winter. He had not noticed his son's absence until Gray Morning came running, her weathered face tight with fear. The search had begun immediately. Warriors spread out in all directions, calling the boy's name into the gathering darkness. Running Wolf felt his heart turn to ice as the minutes stretched into an hour. There were dangers everywhere in this land, from rattlesnakes hiding in the rocks to cougars that prowled the hills at night. The stream, swollen from recent rains, ran swift and deep in places where a small boy could easily be swept away. Emma had heard the commotion from where she sat in the lodge, her hands still bound with leather strips. She understood enough from the urgent voices and the fear in the women's eyes that something was wrong, that a child was missing. When the flap of her lodge was thrown open, and a young warrior gestured frantically for her to come, she hesitated only a moment before following. What choice did she have? Perhaps this was her chance to prove she meant no harm, to show these people that she was more than just a captive to be traded away. The warrior led her to the stream, where Running Wolf stood knee-deep in the rushing water, his face a mask of controlled panic. Emma saw it then, the small figure clinging to a half-submerged log about 30 feet downstream, where the current ran fastest and most dangerous. The boy was crying out, his voice thin and terrified over the roar of the water. Several warriors stood on the bank, clearly calculating the risk, knowing that anyone who went in there could easily be swept away or dashed against the rocks that jutted up like teeth from the streambed. Emma didn't think. Her father had taught her to swim in the wide Ohio River back home, had made her practice until she was strong enough to fight even powerful currents. She kicked off her worn boots and ran toward the water, ignoring the shouts behind her. The cold hit her like a physical blow as she dove in, stealing her breath and making her muscles seize for a heartbeat. Then training and instinct took over, and she began to swim with strong, purposeful strokes, angling across the current rather than fighting directly against it. The water pulled at her dress, the heavy fabric threatening to drag her down. She could hear nothing but the rush of water in her ears and her own gasping breaths. Her arms burned with effort as she fought her way toward the terrified child. Little Hawk's eyes were huge with fear, his small hands white-knuckled on the slippery log. The current kept trying to tear him away, and Emma could see his grip weakening with each passing second. She reached the log and grabbed it with one hand, using the other to pull herself closer to the boy. He looked at her with confusion and terror, this strange white woman appearing from nowhere in the deadly water. Emma forced herself to smile, to make her voice calm and reassuring, even though her lungs were screaming for air and her limbs were growing numb from the cold. "It's all right, sweetheart," she said, knowing he couldn't understand her words but hoping her tone would convey safety. "I've got you now. Hold on to me. Hold on tight." She pried one of his hands from the log and wrapped his arm around her neck, then did the same with the other. The boy clung to her like a drowning kitten, his small body shaking violently. Emma took a deep breath and pushed away from the log, letting the current take them while she angled toward the bank, swimming with every ounce of strength she had left. Her vision started to blur at the edges, black spots dancing before her eyes as her oxygen-starved muscles protested. She could see warriors running along the bank, keeping pace with them, but she couldn't make out their faces or hear their shouts. Just when she thought she couldn't swim another stroke, couldn't keep her head above water for one more second, strong hands grabbed her arms. Running Wolf had waded out to chest-deep water at a spot where the current slowed, and now he lifted both her and his son from the deadly stream, with seemingly effortless strength. He carried Little Hawk to the bank first, setting the boy down gently and checking him for injuries while the child coughed up water and sobbed with relief. Then Running Wolf turned back to Emma, who had collapsed on the rocky shore, her chest heaving as she gulped down air. Her entire body shook uncontrollably from cold and exhaustion, and the aftermath of pure adrenaline. She was barely aware of being lifted again, of being carried somewhere warm. Voices spoke in urgent tones around her, but she couldn't focus on anything except the simple act of breathing, of being alive, of knowing the child was safe. When her vision cleared, she found herself inside a different lodge, wrapped in soft furs that slowly returned warmth to her frozen limbs. Gray Morning knelt beside her, offering a cup of something hot that tasted of herbs and honey. The old woman's eyes, so full of suspicion before, now held something else. Respect, perhaps, or gratitude. Running Wolf sat across the fire from Emma, his son curled against his chest, both of them dry now and wrapped in blankets. Little Hawk had fallen asleep, exhausted by his ordeal, his small face peaceful in slumber. But Running Wolf's eyes were fixed on Emma with an intensity that made her breath catch for entirely different reasons than the cold water had. He studied her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, some internal decision being made. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep and resonant, the words in his language flowing with deliberate slowness, as if he wanted her to understand the weight behind them, even if she couldn't comprehend the meaning. Gray Morning translated haltingly, her English rough but understandable, learned from years of trading with settlers and army scouts. Running Wolf say you risk life for child not yours. Say you could escape in water, could leave boy and swim away, but you save little Hawk. You bring back his heart, his reason for living. This debt cannot be repaid with horses or goods. You show courage and honor of true warrior. Emma's throat tightened with emotion. She looked at the sleeping child, remembering the terror in his eyes, the desperate strength in his small grip around her neck. I couldn't let him drown, she whispered. He's just a little boy. Any mother would have done the same. Gray Morning spoke to Running Wolf, translating Emma's words. The warrior's expression softened almost imperceptibly, and he responded with several sentences that made the old woman nod thoughtfully before turning back to Emma. He say you are free, no more captive. You can stay in village as guest, protected, until we trade with Fort and you can go back to your people. Or if you wish, you leave now. Running Wolf give you horse, food, weapons for journey. He show you way to nearest settlement, 3 days ride east. Your choice. You save his son, you earn freedom and his respect. Emma stared at Running Wolf, stunned by this unexpected turn. She had resigned herself to months, perhaps years, of captivity, had heard stories of white women who were never returned, who disappeared into Comanche territory forever. And now she was being offered not just freedom but honor, treated as an equal rather than property. She saw in Running Wolf's eyes something she hadn't expected to find here. Integrity, nobility, the mark of a man who lived by a code as strict as any she had known in her own world. Emma sat in stunned silence, the weight of Running Wolf's offer settling over her like the warm furs that surrounded her body. Freedom. The word echoed in her mind, so unexpected and precious that she almost couldn't grasp it. Just hours ago, she had been a prisoner with no hope, no future beyond whatever fate these people decided for her. Now she was being given a choice, and that simple act of respect shook something loose inside her chest. She looked at little Hawk, still sleeping peacefully against his father's chest, his small hand clutching Running Wolf's buckskin shirt. The boy's face was so innocent in sleep, all the terror washed away, replaced by the simple trust a child has that his father will keep him safe. Emma thought of her own father, dead now these 2 years from a fever that swept through their Ohio town. She thought of her mother, lost in childbirth when Emma was only 12. She thought of the wagon train, of the friends and neighbors who had died in the raid, and realized with a strange clarity that she had nothing to go back to. No family waiting, no home to return to. She had been traveling west with distant cousins who were almost certainly dead now, seeking some vague dream of a new life in California. I would like to stay, Emma heard herself say, the words surprising her even as they left her lips. For a while, at least, until I understand where I should go, what I should do next. The Gray Morning's eyebrows rose in surprise as she translated, and Running Wolf's expression shifted from neutral respect to something more complex. He studied Emma's face for a long moment, as if searching for deception or hidden motives. Finally, he nodded once, decisively, and spoke again in his flowing language. He say you are welcome, Gray Morning translated. You stay in this lodge, Lodge of Gray Morning, Running Wolf's mother by marriage, Little Hawk's grandmother. You help with work, learn our ways. You are guest but also part of village now. We protect you as our own. Over the following weeks, Emma discovered a world entirely different from anything she had known. She learned that the Comanche were not the savage monsters the settlers described in fearful whispers, but a people with their own rich culture, complex traditions, and deep bonds of family and honor. Gray Morning became her teacher, patient and thorough, showing her how to tan hides properly, how to identify edible plants on the prairie, how to prepare pemmican that would last through the harsh winters. The old woman's gnarled hands moved with practiced efficiency, and her eyes held generations of accumulated wisdom. Little Hawk, once he recovered from his ordeal in the stream, became Emma's constant shadow. The boy was bright and curious, fearless in the way of children who are deeply loved and therefore confident in their place in the world. He taught her words in his language, giggling when she mispronounced them, his small hands shaping hers to show her the proper signs that accompanied spoken words. Emma found herself laughing more than she had in years, her heart lightening as she played simple games with the child, tossing a ball made of wrapped hide or helping him build miniature lodges from sticks. Running Wolf watched from a distance at first, his expression carefully neutral whenever Emma interacted with his son, but she could feel his gaze on her, that intense focus that made her skin prickle with awareness. He was always nearby when she was with Little Hawk, protective but not intrusive, as if he couldn't quite bring himself to trust completely, but wanted desperately to believe she meant no harm. Emma understood his caution. She was still a white woman, still one of the people who brought disease and death and broken promises to his world. But gradually, something shifted between them. It started small, with Running Wolf nodding to her when they passed each other in the camp, acknowledging her presence with the same respect he showed to the other women of the tribe. Then one evening, as Emma sat outside Gray Morning's lodge working on a hide, Little Hawk ran up with a wooden toy his father had carved, a small horse with a flowing mane. The boy chattered excitedly in Comanche, and Running Wolf followed a few steps behind, his expression softening as he watched his son's enthusiasm. "He want show you horse," Running Wolf said in halting English, his accent thick but his words clear enough. "I make for him. He very proud." Emma's heart skipped at the sound of his voice speaking her language. "It's beautiful," she said honestly, taking the toy carefully and admiring the craftsmanship. "You're very talented. The details are incredible." Running Wolf's lips curved in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "Little Hawk say you tell good stories. Stories of big waters, of places far away. He want hear more." "I'd be happy to tell him stories," Emma replied, meeting Running Wolf's dark eyes directly. "If that's all right with you." The warrior studied her for a long moment, and Emma saw something flicker in his gaze, something warm and unexpected. "Yes, is good. He need, how you say, knowledge of all world, not just our world. Times are changing. He must be ready." There was sadness in those last words, a recognition of hard truths that Running Wolf clearly carried heavily. Emma understood, perhaps more than he realized. She had seen the endless wagon trains heading west, the soldiers establishing more forts, the treaties made and broken. She knew that the Comanche way of life was under siege, that men like Running Wolf were fighting a battle they might not be able to win. As autumn painted the prairie in shades of gold and crimson, Emma found herself settling into the rhythm of village life. She was no longer a stranger, but a valued member of the community, her skills in healing minor injuries and her knowledge of English making her useful during trading expeditions. The women accepted her, teaching her their songs and including her in their gatherings. The children played around her without fear, and the warriors nodded respectfully when she passed. But it was with Running Wolf that the most profound change occurred. They began spending more time together, usually with Little Hawk as an unwitting chaperone, but sometimes alone as well. Running Wolf taught her to ride in the Comanche way, showed her how to track game across the prairie, shared stories of his people's history and beliefs. Emma taught him more English, read to him from a small leather-bound book of poetry she had managed to keep hidden in her dress during the raid, discussed the world beyond the prairie with its cities and machines and constant changes. They talked late into the night sometimes, sitting by the fire outside Gray Morning's lodge, while the old woman smiled knowingly from inside and Little Hawk slept peacefully. Running Wolf spoke of his wife, of the grief that had nearly destroyed him, of the responsibility he felt to protect his son and his people in increasingly dangerous times. Emma shared her own losses, the loneliness of being alone in the world, the fear and uncertainty that had defined her life since her parents died. "You are brave," Running Wolf said one night, his voice low and intimate in the darkness. "Many white women would hate us, fear us always, but you see past skin, past difference. You see people. You gave me freedom when you could have kept me prisoner." Emma replied softly. "You honored a debt when many would have ignored it. How could I not see the man you truly are?" Running Wolf reached across the space between them, and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against her skin. The touch sent electricity through Emma's body, a connection so powerful it made her breath catch. She saw in his eyes that he felt it too, this impossible attraction that had grown between two people from such different worlds. "Emma," he said, his accent making her name sound exotic and beautiful. I feel something I not feel since wife died. Something I not think possible again." Emma's heart thundered in her chest. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I didn't expect this. Didn't imagine I could feel this way about anyone. Especially not here. Not now. But Running Wolf, there are so many obstacles, so many reasons this is complicated." "I know," he said, his thumb stroking gentle circles on the back of her hand. "My people, your people not understand. Many will say is wrong, is betrayal. But my heart not lie. You save my son, save my reason for living. But more than that, you make me remember how to live, not just survive. You bring light back to dark place inside me." Before Emma could respond, a shout rang out from the edge of the village. Both of them jumped to their feet, Running Wolf's hand instinctively going to the knife at his belt. Warriors were calling out warnings, and Emma could see torches being lit throughout the camp. Gray Morning emerged from the lodge, her face tight with concern. "Soldiers," she said grimly. "Coming from east. Many soldiers." Running Wolf's expression hardened into something fierce and dangerous. "Get inside lodge," he commanded Emma. "Stay with Gray Morning and Little Hawk. Do not come out no matter what you hear." "Running Wolf, wait." Emma grabbed his arm, fear flooding through her. "Don't do anything rash. Maybe they just want to talk, to negotiate." The warrior looked at her with eyes that had gone cold and distant, the walls going back up between them. "White soldiers not come to talk in middle of night with guns and fire. They come to take, to kill, to destroy. This I know too well." He pulled away from her grip and ran toward the center of the village where the other warriors were gathering. Emma stood frozen for a heartbeat, her mind racing. She knew the army, knew their brutal tactics, and their tendency to attack first and ask questions never. But she also knew Running Wolf and his people, knew they would fight to defend their home and families with everything they had. This could become a massacre, with innocents on both sides paying the price. Gray Morning tugged at her arm urgently. "Come, Emma, not safe out here." But Emma shook her head, a desperate plan forming in her mind. "No, I have to try something. I have to try to stop this before it starts." Before the old woman could protest, Emma ran toward the edge of the village where the soldiers were approaching. She could see them now, perhaps 30 men on horseback, led by a captain whose face was set in grim determination. The warriors had formed a defensive line, weapons ready. Running Wolf at the center, looking every inch the fierce fighter the army feared. Emma threw herself between the two groups, her hands raised, her voice ringing out clear and strong in the night air. "Stop, please, everybody stop." The captain held up his hand, halting his troops. His eyes narrowed as he took in Emma's appearance, her white skin and auburn hair unmistakable even in buckskin clothing. "Ma'am, are you Emma Morgan? We've been searching for survivors from the wagon train raid." "I am," Emma said, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might explode. "Captain, please, these people are not your enemy right now. They haven't harmed me. In fact, they've treated me with more kindness and respect than I could have hoped for." The captain's face registered shock and confusion. "Ma'am, you've been held captive for over 2 months. We're here to rescue you and punish those responsible for the raid." "I'm not a captive," Emma said firmly, standing her ground even as she felt Running Wolf's presence behind her, radiating tension. "I'm a guest here, and this village had nothing to do with the raid." The captain stared at Emma as if she had spoken in a foreign language, his weathered face a mask of disbelief and suspicion. Behind him, the soldiers shifted restlessly in their saddles, hands tight on their rifles, clearly confused by this woman who stood defending the very people they had come to attack. The tension in the air was so thick Emma could barely breathe. Every muscle in her body coiled tight with fear and determination. "Ma'am, with all due respect, you don't know what you're saying," the captain said, his voice edged with the patronizing tone of a man who believed women incapable of understanding their own situations. "These savages have clearly confused you, maybe even threatened you into defending them. We're here to bring you home to civilization, to safety." Emma felt anger flash hot through her chest at his words, at the casual dismissal and the ugly prejudice dripping from every syllable. "Captain, I know exactly what I'm saying. My name is Emma Catherine Morgan. I am 24 years old, of sound mind, and perfectly capable of understanding my own circumstances. These people saved my life, treated my injuries, gave me shelter and food and friendship when they could have done far worse. The man standing behind me freed me from captivity weeks ago and offered me safe passage back to the settlements. I chose to stay." The captain's eyes flicked past Emma to Running Wolf, and she saw his hand tighten on his sidearm. "That true, Chief? You're claiming you let her go free?" Running Wolf stepped forward to stand beside Emma, his presence solid and protective. When he spoke, his English was careful but clear, each word weighted with dignity. "She saved my son from drowning. Risk own life for child who is not hers, who is child of enemy in white man's eyes. This debt cannot be measured in horses or gold. I give her freedom, give her choice. She choose to stay with us to learn our ways. She is under my protection, and protection of all my people. You come here with guns and fire in night, ready to kill women and children who have done nothing to you. Who is savage, Captain?" A murmur ran through the soldiers, some looking uncomfortable at Running Wolf's words. Emma saw doubt flickering in several faces, young men who perhaps had not fully considered what they were about to do. The captain's jaw clenched, his face reddening with anger and embarrassment at being challenged. "We have reports of raids, of stolen cattle and horses, of settlers murdered in their beds," the captain snapped. "Your people are responsible." "Not this village," Running Wolf replied, his voice hard as stone. "We hunt buffalo, we follow old paths, we stay away from white settlements. Other bands, yes, they fight back against those who steal their land, kill their buffalo, break every treaty. But we seek peace. We seek only to live as we have always lived. You come here to punish innocent for crimes of others. This is justice in white man's world?" Emma turned to face the captain fully, her voice rising with passion and urgency. "Captain, please listen to me. I have lived with these people for over 2 months. I have seen their daily lives, their families, their children. They are not monsters. They are human beings trying to survive in a world that is crushing them from all sides. If you attack this village tonight, you will be killing innocents. You will be creating the very violence you claim to be preventing." The captain looked torn, his military training and orders warring with the evidence before his eyes. Behind Emma, she could hear the women and children of the village gathering, their voices rising in worried whispers. Little Hawk's small voice called out for his father, and Emma's heart clenched at the fear she heard there. "I have my orders, ma'am," the captain said finally, but his voice lacked conviction now. "I'm supposed to bring you back and deal with the hostile Indians in this region." "Then bring me back," Emma said quickly, an idea forming even as she spoke. "Take me with you right now and leave this village in peace. You'll have rescued a white captive. You can report success to your commanders. These people have done nothing wrong. Please, Captain, I'm begging you, show mercy." The captain was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving from Emma to Running Wolf to the gathered villagers behind them. Emma could see him calculating, weighing his options, perhaps seeing for the first time that the situation was not as simple as his orders had made it seem. Finally, he sighed heavily and turned to his men. "Stand down," he ordered. "We're taking Miss Morgan and heading back to Fort Richardson. No shots fired unless they attack first." Relief flooded through Emma so powerfully her knees nearly buckled. Behind her, she heard Running Wolf release a breath he had been holding, felt the tension ease slightly in the warrior's stance. But even as the immediate danger passed, Emma's heart broke at what came next. She would have to leave. She would have to go back to the white world, leave behind the people who had become her family, leave behind the man she had fallen impossibly, undeniably in love with. She turned to Running Wolf, and the anguish in his dark eyes mirrored her own. "I have to go with them," she said softly, her voice cracking. "It's the only way to keep everyone safe." Running Wolf's jaw clenched, every line of his body screaming protest even as he nodded understanding. "I know. You save us again, Emma. Save my son, save my people. This debt I can never repay." "There's no debt," Emma whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks now. "You gave me something I never expected to find. You showed me what it means to truly live, to be part of something bigger than myself. You made me feel alive again, made me remember how to hope, how to love. Running Wolf reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the warrior's calluses on his palms. My heart is yours, Emma Catherine Morgan. It will always be yours, no matter how many miles separate us, no matter how many seasons pass. You are written on my soul in ways that can never be erased. Emma covered his hands with her own, memorizing the feel of his skin, the warmth of his touch, the way his eyes held hers with such intensity, it felt like drowning and flying at the same time. I love you, she said, the words breaking free at last, urgent and desperate and achingly true. I know it's impossible. I know the world won't understand, but I love you with everything I am. Emma, Running Wolf said her name like a prayer, like a promise. Then he pulled her close and kissed her. A kiss that held all the words they didn't have time to say, all the future they wouldn't get to share, all the love and grief and impossible hope that lived in both their hearts. When they finally pulled apart, Emma could see Gray Morning standing nearby with Little Hawk in her arms. The old woman's face was wet with tears, but she was smiling through them. She set the boy down and he ran to Emma, throwing his small arms around her waist. Don't go, Little Hawk cried in his language, his voice breaking Emma's heart into 1,000 pieces. Please don't leave us. Emma knelt down and hugged him tightly, breathing in the sweet scent of his hair, feeling his small body shake with sobs. I have to, sweetheart, but I will never forget you. You are so brave, so strong, so special. You're going to grow up to be an amazing man, just like your father. Promise me you'll take care of him. The boy nodded against her shoulder, his tears soaking through her buckskin dress. Gray Morning came and gently extracted him, whispering soft words of comfort in his ear. The old woman reached out and squeezed Emma's hand. No words needed to convey the depth of understanding and gratitude between them. The captain cleared his throat impatiently. Ma'am, we need to move out. It's a long ride back to the fort. Emma stood on shaking legs, forcing herself to turn away from the life she wanted, from the man she loved, from the family she had found in the most unexpected place. One of the soldiers brought a horse forward, and hands helped her mount, even though she could barely see through her tears. As the column began to move, Emma looked back one last time. Running Wolf stood tall and proud, his son held against his side, his face a mask that couldn't quite hide the devastation beneath. Their eyes met across the growing distance, and Emma saw him raise his hand to his heart, then extend it toward her, a gesture of love, of honor, of a bond that transcended culture and circumstance. The ride to Fort Richardson took 3 days, days that passed in a blur of prairie grass and endless sky, and a grief so profound Emma thought it might consume her entirely. The soldiers treated her with awkward kindness, clearly uncomfortable with her tears and her defense of the Comanche. The captain tried several times to convince her that she had been manipulated, that she would understand better once she had some distance. Emma stopped trying to explain, knowing he would never comprehend. At the fort, she was examined by a doctor, questioned by the commander, and eventually given a room in the civilian quarters. Arrangements were being made to send her east to relatives in Ohio, distant cousins who had sent inquiries when news of the wagon train raid reached them. Emma went through the motions mechanically, her body present but her heart still back in that hidden valley, with a warrior and his son. 2 weeks passed in this strange limbo. Emma helped the fort's doctor with his patients, taught reading to some of the soldiers' children, tried to find purpose in the empty days. But every night she lay awake, remembering Running Wolf's touch, the sound of Little Hawk's laughter, the feeling of belonging she had found among people she was supposed to fear. Then, on a cool October morning, everything changed. Emma was in the small vegetable garden behind the doctor's quarters when she heard a commotion at the fort's main gate. Shouting, the sound of horses, and then a voice she would recognize anywhere calling her name. She dropped the basket of vegetables and ran, her heart hammering with hope and disbelief. There at the gate, surrounded by nervous soldiers, was Running Wolf on his painted horse. He wore his finest buckskin clothing decorated with intricate beadwork, his long hair braided with feathers and strips of leather. He looked magnificent and fierce, and utterly determined. Behind him rode Gray Morning on a gentle mare, and before her on the saddle sat Little Hawk, his small face lighting up like the sun when he saw Emma. And behind them, to Emma's shock, was a wagon driven by a white man she recognized as Samuel Henderson, a trader who was known to deal fairly with the Comanche. Emma pushed through the gathering crowd, not caring about propriety or protocol or the scandalized whispers rising around her. She stopped a few feet from Running Wolf's horse, her breath coming in gasps, afraid to believe what she was seeing. Running Wolf dismounted in one fluid motion and stood before her, his dark eyes burning with intensity and purpose. When he spoke, his voice carried clearly in the morning air, his English carefully practiced. Emma Catherine Morgan, I come here in peace in front of white man's law and white man's guns, to speak truth from my heart. I love you, my son loves you, my people honor you. I know white world and Comanche world are enemies. I know many will say this is wrong, is impossible, but my heart knows only truth, knows only that you are the woman who brought light back to darkness, who saved not just my son's life, but my own soul. He paused, glancing at Samuel Henderson, who nodded encouragingly. The trader stepped forward, a leather document case in his hands. Miss Morgan, Samuel said in his gravelly voice, Running Wolf came to me 2 days after you left, asked me to help him do something unprecedented. He wants to make a formal arrangement, recognized by both Comanche law and white man's law. He's offering to establish a ranch on land that borders both territories, a place where his people can trade fairly, and where white settlers can learn to coexist peacefully with the Comanche. Samuel opened the case and pulled out several papers. I've been working with the fort commander and the territorial governor. They're willing to grant him a tract of land and official trading rights if he agrees to act as a liaison between the fort and the peaceful Comanche bands. It's a chance for real peace, Miss Morgan. A chance for something better than endless fighting. Emma's mind reeled, unable to process what she was hearing. Running Wolf reached out and took her hands, his touch sending that familiar electricity racing through her body. I ask you, Emma, if you will be part of this, Running Wolf said, his voice dropping lower, more intimate despite the audience. If you will stand beside me, not as captive, not as guest, but as wife. Help me build bridge between two worlds. Help me raise my son to be man who understands both peoples. Help me prove that love is stronger than hate, that peace is possible even when world says it is not. Tears streamed down Emma's face as joy exploded in her chest, so powerful and overwhelming she could barely stand. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Running Wolf pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet as he spun her around. The crowd erupted in a mixture of cheers and gasps and shocked exclamations. Little Hawk squirmed free from Gray Morning's hold and ran to them, and Running Wolf caught him up with one arm while keeping the other around Emma, the three of them suddenly a family, complete and whole. The fort commander pushed through the crowd, his face a mixture of bewilderment and cautious hope. This is highly irregular, he sputtered, but there was no real anger in his voice. But if this arrangement brings peace to the territory, if it prevents more bloodshed, then I suppose we can make allowances. Samuel Henderson grinned broadly. I'll help them get established. Already found a good piece of land with water and grass, close enough to the fort for protection but far enough for privacy. Running Wolf's band has agreed to settle nearby peacefully. Could be the start of something important, Commander. Could be the beginning of real coexistence. Over the following weeks, the impossible became reality. Running Wolf and Emma were married in 2 ceremonies, one in the Comanche tradition and one recognized by the territorial law. They built a sturdy ranch house on the land Samuel had found, with a lodge nearby that honored Running Wolf's heritage. Gray Morning came to live with them, her wisdom and experience invaluable as they navigated the complex waters between 2 cultures. Little Hawk thrived in this new arrangement, learning to read and write English from Emma, while maintaining all the skills and traditions of his Comanche heritage. He became a bridge himself, translating not just words, but understanding between the ranch visitors from both worlds. The ranch became known as a place of fair dealing and honest communication. Comanche bands came to trade their buffalo hides and intricate beadwork for supplies they needed. White settlers came to learn how to survive on the harsh prairie, how to track game and find water. Running Wolf's courage in choosing peace over endless war inspired other leaders, and slowly, tentatively, a fragile understanding began to grow. On a warm spring evening, as the sun painted the prairie gold and crimson, Emma stood on the porch of their home, watching Running Wolf teach Little Hawk to break a young horse. The boy sat proud and confident, his father's patient voice guiding him through each step. Gray Morning hummed an old song from the doorway, and the scent of cooking meat drifted from inside the house. Emma's hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the flutter of new life within. A child who would be born into two worlds, who would carry the best of both peoples in their blood. She thought about the terrified woman she had been on that desperate day when she dove into the rushing water to save a drowning boy, never imagining where that single act of courage would lead. Running Wolf looked up and caught her watching, and the smile that spread across his face was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. He said something to Little Hawk and then strode across the yard, pulling Emma into his arms with the easy affection of a man who had found his home, his heart, his reason for living. "What you think about?" he asked, his English much improved now, though his accent still made her smile. "I'm thinking about how love can change everything," Emma said softly, reaching up to cup his face. "How one choice, one moment of seeing past fear to the human heart beneath, can transform hatred into understanding, violence into peace. I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you caught me risking my life for your son that day, and how you took the most unexpected action of all by choosing to see me not as an enemy, but as a person worthy of honor." Running Wolf kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips with infinite tenderness. "You are my heart, Emma. You and Little Hawk and this new child coming, you are everything. I chose peace because you showed me that courage is not only in fighting, but in building, in loving, in believing that tomorrow can be better than today." Little Hawk ran up and wrapped his arms around both of them, laughing with